Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are reviewing Pluribus Season 1, created by Gilligan, starring Rhea Seehorn, Karolina Wydra, Carlos-Manuel Vesga, and many more actors making up the collective. This show follows Sturka, the world's most miserable person who has to save the world from a mysterious wave of forced happiness in the form of a hive mind. And I'll of course be getting to spoilers for this season of Pluribus, leading all the way up to the finale, so if you haven't had a chance to watch it just yet, and this premise sounds interesting to you, check it out on Apple TV, and for those of you who have, let's jump right into it.
Our feelings for you haven't changed, Carol. But after everything that's happened, we just need a little space.
I was very excited for the show going into it. This is Gilligan's first project outside of the world of Breaking Bad, which was almost universally loved by fans of television. And for him to take on a new dystopian sci-fi series that had extremely vague and intriguing marketing was right up my alley. And I mean, just listen to the logline of just the world's most miserable person having to save the world from happiness. That just sounds incredible. But the conversations around the show haven't been as universally loved as Gilligan's past projects, and I believe it's due to two main reasons. For one, the show's pacing is a lot slower than that of Breaking Bad. At its heart, Pluribus is a character study for Rhea Seehorn's Carol, as the collective slowly attempts to break down her rebellious nature. And the other factor that has affected the conversations around this show is the fact that this show strives in morally ambiguous and complex themes that are meant to leave the audience with conflicting feelings, especially when it comes to Carol's character and the choices that she makes throughout this season. For me, the show's pacing wasn't the biggest deal in the world, however, I completely understand the frustration that it brought out of some viewers. This story is mainly character-driven over being plot-driven, with large leaps in plot-related developments being fewer and further between the changes in character. Ideally, both of these elements would progress at an equal pace, but that is not what we get here, and if it were up to me, I would personally prefer a character-driven story to be more in the forefront than a show that is purely plot-driven with little characterization. Adding on to the frustrations for some, the show had a weekly release schedule, which, for a show with a slower moving progression of plots, that was maybe not the best strategy for this show, despite my love for weekly releases. So maybe if they did drop it all at once, or maybe in chunks, I think that maybe audiences would be more on board to the show's pacing, but that was not the case for this one. But if you haven't watched the show and you're down to stream all 9 episodes now, I think it'd be very much worth it. But on the flip side, with the show's fixation on character, the show also presents Carol, who has become quite divisive, to say the very least. I've seen a ton of hot takes on this character online, and it's quickly became my favorite thing about this show. I found people's frustrations by her actions fascinating, like with her attacking the collective, being cavalier with the grenade, her outbursts causing the collective to seize, causing the deaths of millions of people, and her abrasive demands for answers, while others simply just asked. But when it comes to me, and at least my perspective that I had going into this show, which maybe says a lot more about me than it does about some others, was the fact that I feel like I would do the exact same things that Carol did inside of this series. I found her to be extremely relatable because of how flawed she was. Everything she does has a shade of selfishness to it. Her grief in losing her wife Helen at the start of the show pushed her to fear and reject the collective at such a heightened degree. Her stubbornness in digging Helen's grave on her own with no help whatsoever was admirable, but at the cost of her own health. She refused any interactions with the collective at first, while the other 12, asked questions and learned what was going on through conversation. But as the show progressed and Carol became more reliant on the collective to mask her own feelings of loneliness and depression, she began to slip into those same habits that she criticized those other 12 for doing. She went from attempting to force the collective to show their true intentions, to trying to manipulate the collective to showing their true intentions, to beginning to rely on the collective, to being manipulated by the collective in the final few episodes. So to any critics of the show saying that nothing happens between episodes 5 through 8, I would entirely disagree, as the collective was truly able to break Carol during that time. Seeing Carol fall into a full-blown relationship with Zosia to watching their first interactions with each other was a total 180, and this is the part of the show that I found to be the most relatable, and also the scariest. Whenever someone asks me what my greatest fear is, it's this feeling that I find very hard to quantify with words. The best that I can do is to say that I fear the feeling of being alone in a crowded room, being surrounded by friends or family or strangers or whoever, yet feeling entirely closed off and distant from them. And I think that this show, more so than anything that I've I've ever seen before in film and television captures my biggest nightmare. And apparently that's being trapped in a world where all the people are in this collective hive mind and that I'm not a part of, which thanks Vince Gilligan for giving me a brand new conceptual fear that built off my own existing fears. There are many themes that you can dig into with this show when it comes to AI, with the collective holding all of human knowledge and experience, yet not being able to create anything new, themes of cult mentality with the other 12 representing those that fall in line with this collective, as it holds everything they could ever want, even if it means they will eventually lose their freedom to think differently or express their own free will down the line. But the themes that really hammered home for me were the themes of loneliness and depression, especially in the episodes where the collective completely abandoned Carol, again in those episodes between 5 and 8, leaving her entirely isolated in Albuquerque with literally no one in the world for her to talk to, not giving her the grace to hear someone's voice over the phone when asking the collective to get her something, which that voice message was absolutely hilarious, and the fact that they played it in its full the entire time throughout those episodes was just hilarious to me. But being trapped and isolated with nothing but one's own mind and thoughts would drive anybody mad, which is exactly what we see happen to Carol with her pleas for them to come back, bringing actual tears to my eyes. It was truly devastating to see how the lack of the collective's presence was weaponized to manipulate her to a point of true desperation. It was heartbreaking. Seehorn's performance here is one of my favorites in recent memory, and although I understand the division amongst fans and hearing some hating her and some loving her, I think we can all agree that she is one fascinating character to watch.
Come on, I must have told some human being at some point that I love train horns. It is the loneliest sound in the world.
But Carol isn't the only one in this series, although it does definitely feel like that at times. The supporting cast here is also fascinating to watch, especially with Zosia, played by Karolina Wydra, who is the most prominent character besides Seehorn, and her presence here is always welcoming. I think all the actors that play the collective are great, even those who pop in for one or two scenes, like these two guys that talk to Carol when Zosia is recovering after Carol's several incidents where she harmed her, whether it was intentional or not. But either way, Zosia is the true face of the collective for the purpose of this series, and I think that everyone bases their mannerisms off of her. She plays her character in the exact opposites as Seehorn. She is always smiling, she is always calm, she is always presenting herself in an open manner, where Carol is bitter, chaotic, brash, and closed off. There's just such a welcoming nature to Zosia that makes the manipulation of the collective so effective. The fact that they found some random woman across the planet to fly all the way to Albuquerque just to fit the fantasy role of a character within one of Carol's books with a face that she would find attractive is actually insane. And that's manipulation and comfort Carol feels around Zosia translates perfectly to the audience as well. We also have Carlos-Manuel Vesga as Manousos, one of the very few who haven't been affected by the collective, and the only other person who matches Carol's stubbornness and miserable persona. His drive to not let the collective support him in any way, shape, or form was also fascinating to watch. If anything, he goes a step further than Carol in every single way, isolating himself from the get-go from the collective, refusing to take a flight from Paraguay to visit Carol, almost killing himself in the jungle just to make that journey completely on his own, and even leaving money at every single car that he takes gas from. He was just such a fascinating character to watch, especially in his journey that was going all the way from Paraguay all the way to Albuquerque. This man is so unbelievably motivated to turn the world back to how it was, and it was fascinating to see someone with that drive that Carol had at the beginning of this series interact with a version of Carol who almost let the collective change her mind by the end of the season. We also have Mr. DIABATÉ, who is probably the most despicably charming character in this show. Samba Schutte is very charismatic in the role, but man, is his character just the worst. His abuse of the collective for his own benefits was the peak of selfishness we see in this show, and outright disgusting at times. Honestly, the idea of consent in this show is a lot more complicated than you'd think, but the episode where Carol visits him and the collective flee from Vegas brought out a level of nuance to this character that's what I really appreciated from him. You can see that the collective is throwing everything at him in their attempt to also manipulate him in choosing to join the collective, but he also wants to keep his free will. Whether that's to do more bad than good, I guess we'll have to see in the future, but at this point in time, he is more than content in living his life in luxury at the expense of all the individuals that he takes advantage of in this collective. Honestly, another fascinating character in the show that I'm very curious to see what they do with him in the future. But getting into the finale in particular, there were two moments that really struck me that makes me extremely excited for season 2, and that is the opening scene as we watch one of the 12 submit themselves to the collective, which I found to be profoundly sad. Maybe it's just me, but it almost felt like she was sacrificing sacrificing her own life to get what she thinks would make her feel accepted and happy. And as soon as she joins, all the culture that the collective was mimicking in her village all quickly fade away, and any personality she brought to the facade that she was living in was stripped away at a moment's notice. And then of course she just walks off with all the others to go eat people and do the bidding of the remaining 11 survivors, leaving her poor little goat alone inside of this village. We're also introduced to the great new dynamic between Carol and Manousos, whose matching personalities are going to clash so brilliantly inside of the future of the second season. I cannot wait for that. But the other moment in particular in this finale that gets me extremely excited for the future is Carol's realization that she has allowed herself to fall into the facade that the collective has put her in. She seemingly ends the relationship that she has had with Zosia to go back to saving the world, because deep down she still believes that the collective will stop at nothing to get her to join them, that her accepting the collective or the collective accepting her would do nothing to get rid of her feeling truly alone in a world where individuality no longer exists. She flies down in a helicopter carrying some crates, and we get the greatest callback in the history of this show to an earlier episode with the collective giving Carol an atom bomb. Yes, that's right, she asked for an atom bomb and they gave it to her, and Manousos' reaction was just priceless.
Sturka. What is this?
Atom bomb.
So despite the show's slower pace, I found it to really dive deep into many fascinating themes that purposefully ask the audience to question what we believe and why our individual opinions differ so greatly. And I think that's largely the point here. If we all watch this show and all walk away thinking the exact same thing, feeling the exact same things about Carol as everyone else, what is the fun in that? Where's our individuality? And wouldn't that make us no different than the collective that we all hopefully hope is reversed at some point inside of this show's future? But those are just going to be my thoughts on Pluribus Season 1. Will you continue to watch this series for a second season, or did Vince Gilligan let you down with this season? Let me know in the comment section down below, and as always, if you did enjoy this review, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe to the channel to see more reviews just like this one. So thanks everyone for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next one.